So, the elements of manipulation. This chapter is documented from several books of specialty in sociology, socio-psychology, the psychology of the masses, and so on. We will present in the following some elements of manipulation that can be easily seen in the articles from GP. In order to make it come clear for those of you who do not have the proper knowledge, we will also give some definitions from the specialized materials in PR, advertising, mass manipulation, social psychology, and so on. I will begin with 2 quotations. 1. A lie repeated for a few times remains a lie. A lie repeated 1,000,000 times becomes a truth. Propaganda doesn't have anything to do with the truth. We don't speak to say something, but to obtain a certain effect. The author of this was Goebbels, propaganda chief of the Nazi Party. The next quotation, I quote, "If you want to hide something in plain sight, you have to make it so far out that no one will think it's possible." End of the quotation. John Carrion, chief of the political campaign in the White House. Great collection of thinkers. Some introduction elements. In the media campaign in the Danish newspapers came out an amazing number of elements of manipulation. For this reason, we will start by clarifying the notions of disinformation and manipulation. Disinformation. According to the Dictionary of Sociology, disinformation represents any deliberate intervention upon the basic elements of a communication process with the purpose of modifying the messages and propagating a false information. This can include, for example, sending false documents, manuscripts, pictures, together with the process of launching and propagating certain rumors and calumnies aiming to determine the receptors, the public which is disinformed, which is called target, to determining the receptors, certain attitudes, reactions, and even actions. Any action of disinformation implies the existence of the beneficiaries, the ones who are ordering the action of disinformation. Also, it implies the specialists, the ones who are planning and supervising the entire process of disinformation. And some intermediary agents, the agents of influence called, who are placed between the specialist and the targeted crowd. Beside this structure, there must be some relays, individuals who are sensitive to the information used for disinformation and who are usually unconscious about their negative role in this process. People who just start to scream by themselves, yeah, that's right. Analyzing the structure of the media campaign in Denmark, we can see the existence of the agents of influence, the journalists. We can see also the specialists, the one who designed such a coherent media campaign, which transmit from that. And even the existence of some relays, the so-called witness, Celia, Karsten, Kim, and even Dialogue Center. Observing this, one can immediately understand that the whole scheme is started by somebody, the beneficiary. Without the existence of the beneficiary, there would not be any campaign. And this is our target further. Another important aspect related to disinformation is that is aiming to manipulate the audience, including the rational level, and this is done either through discrediting the real information that is in contradiction with the effect the agent wants to obtain, or through sustaining some false conclusions. If we look into the Danish media campaign, we find both these kind of disinformation. Here are some examples. The journalist is discrediting the decision of Copenhagen City Council regarding the distribution of funds to Natha Yoga Center, calling them naive, despite the repeated statements by the officials of the council on this issue. This is the discrediting the real information. And false information. The journalist, which is the agents of influence, conclude that Natha is a sect misusing public fund as a result of some incoherent and sometimes no information. It's just concluding that. A well-known tactic in the manuals of disinformation is to mix the truth and the real observations with lies and fake conclusions, or presenting only a part of the truth, as if this is the whole truth. We find this well-known tactic all over the articles published by GP. Here are some examples. 1. The newspaper publishes a list of Natha public funding, a catchy subject in times of crisis. The list is taken from the authorities, so it is true. But then they say that the money support erotic movies, conspiracy theories, or prostitution, which is a stupid statement. Another point, the newspaper says that Natha is linked to Misa, which is true. But then they extend the notions, saying that Natha is completely controlled by Misa, and there is even a financial link between them, which is false. Another aspect, the newspaper report about Sublime Erotica as a company which produces erotic movies, which is true. Then they insinuate that to produce such a movie costs between 200 to 500,000 kroner, which is a complete lie. And associating it with the first part, insinuate the dimensions of the business of Sublime Erotica. Well, they wish, but I don't think it's there. Another statement, the newspaper report that some teachers of Misa are currently part of a trial in Romania, which is true. But the newspaper says that Misa is in a trial in Romania, which is a lie. They say that the accusations in the file are prostitution, trafficking of women, and tax fraud, which is an enormous lie. Again, we can see the same insidious pattern of disinformation. Another example, the newspaper report that one of Natha's teachers participated to an erotic movie, which is true. And then the newspaper conclude that Natha is producing erotic movies, which is a complete lie. Based on that, they are questioning all the funding of Natha, which is further disinformation. Another example, the newspaper brings up the story of a woman who got pregnant, which is true. Then they pretend that she was forbidden to have children, which is a lie. Moreover, based on that soap opera or emotional manipulation, they create an entire psychosis around the yoga school, Natha, which is disinformation. Another example, the newspaper brings in the opinion of an organization called Dialogue Center. They truly exist. But they pretend to be experts in Natha, which is a complete lie, since they never set foot in Natha. Moreover, the organization is far from being a reliable source, several Danish scholars even openly criticizing them for their one-sidedness. Therefore, the status shown about Dialogue Center is a lie. Another disinformation. The newspaper presents the situation in which Celia and Karsten were advised to reconsider their decision regarding the baby, which is true. But it's only half of the truth. The whole truth was presented above to you. Another point of disinformation. The newspaper presented Kim as the driver of Mihai, which is partially true. But in reality, Kim was also the one who was trying to steal the big property of Natha Yoga Center, Boga, which is the reality about Kim. Again, disinformation by half-truth. Then another example, the newspaper present the fact that Grieg was in hiding, which is partially true. The disinformation agent failed to present the fact that Grieg was granted political asylum in Sweden after a thorough investigation and a trial in the Supreme Court of Sweden, and the verdict was given for keeping him alive, not because of hiding. These were only few examples of this well-known tactic of mixing truth with lies in order to disinform. Further, we approach manipulation. Manipulation. According to the Dictionary of Sociology, manipulation is the action to determine a social factor, a person, a group, or a community, or a country to think or to act in a way which is compatible with the interest of the manipulator and not with its own interests. Manipulation uses techniques and strategies which intentionally distort the truth, giving the people who are manipulated the impression of freedom of thinking and freedom of decision. This aspect is very important, as we will see several places in which people are given, several places in this campaign, people are given the impression that they are freely choosing what they think or not when reading the media articles against Natha. Compared with the influence through rational persuasion, manipulation does not aim for deep understanding of the situation, but to impose a convenient understanding for the manipulator. For this, manipulation uses falsified arguments to lead astray, as well as using the emotional and non-rational aspects. In the case of manipulation, the real intention is the one who transmits the real intention of the one who transmits the message remain completely hidden for the one which is manipulated. From different studies, it was noticed that manipulation is a far more efficient and strong instrument than using power, because manipulation creates within the ones which are manipulated the strange impression that it is their wish and their will to act in the sense which is desired by the manipulator. After these introductory elements, let's give some examples. In fact, the whole campaign is introducing some emotional elements mixed with false arguments. Then, I will tell you some. It was mostly out of curiosity that Jesper, Karsten, started to take yoga courses. Then it says, the young man from Copenhagen was mostly interested in getting off the horse he had known until then. Good education, good job, good girlfriend, and a promising career laid out before him. He was fascinated by the charismatic daily leader. He was attracted to the principle of free love with many sex partners, and slowly the grounded Copenhagener let go of his connections with the world and moved into the ashram. Another one. Natha can have a magnetic force on young people. I have seen many who have quit their jobs, left their families. What will they do when they realize one day that everything is based on a lie? Another one. Celia and Karsten began to attend yoga in Copenhagen. She was just turned 24 and arrived to Copenhagen from a smaller town in Jylland with such fine grades that she was admitted to the prodigious philosophy studies at university. Another one. At the time, I was a smart girl with high heels shoes and partied every weekend and had fun. These were the emotional introductions to some false arguments. Here are the arguments. Natha is not the innocent yoga center it pretends to be. Another one. It is a sect where some of the teachers are involved in sex services, a prostitution-like company. Behind this is a strange idea that one person controls everything, Gregorian Bivolaru, in a dictator style, through the people he sent. In Denmark, it is Mihai Stoyan deciding everything. We already presented previously about the falseness of this argument. Another one. Celia had previously thought that it was striking that none of the women in Natha choose to have children. And the whole story, which I already presented. Another argument, which is associated with the emotional aspect. According to Misa's homepage, Gregorian Bivolaru has disclosed that the Freemasons have artificially produced viruses such as AIDS, Ebola, and SARS in laboratories in order to spread the virus and to reduce the world population to 1 billion. This idea is emotional, talking about the global catastrophe, and a lie, because anyone can see on the website that it was not Grieg, but a series of scientists who proved that those viruses were produced in the laboratories. Grieg was the one of many who advised people to consider this point of view. Through the articles presented in the newspaper, we can clearly see that the agent, the journalist, tries to give the impression that it is an objective investigation, thus giving people the impression that they are free to think and to choose which is the right point of view. The impression of freedom of thinking and decision is a fundamental aspect in manipulation. In reality, the newspaper did not publish any information from Natha's side, despite many replies that Natha sent during this campaign only. Through this, the method of manipulation is underlined, giving the public the impression that they are free to choose, but limiting their access to half of the information. We will analyze in the following another interesting aspect which comes out from this media campaign. One of the most spectacular discoveries in the research related to manipulation refers to the crucial importance that the feeling of autonomy plays. People will react to any factor which represent a threat to their freedom, to their comfort, life status, and so on. The French sociologist Jacques Brel in 1966 called this reactance. Other studies which unfolded around the year 2000 by other two French sociologists, Nicolas Beguin and Alexandre Pascual, proved that it is amazingly much easier to produce certain behavior to the subjects which are given the impression that they are given all the options and the choice belongs to them. As a conclusion, all these studies shows that in order to manipulate, you don't have to make that person to believe that he is free. You just have to remind the person that he is free, even though it is not true. The effect will be obtained with simulating a neutral attitude and presenting partial information. According to these studies, it is much easier to make people believe they choose freely, having all the information, if you present the information from exterior sources in a neutral way and only the information you want. Looking from this perspective upon the media campaign, we will see that the whole attitude of the newspaper is apparently neutral and apparently presenting different points of view. In reality, they present only one side, and even that is twisted and manipulated. There is an aspect which we have to clarify. According to the psychologist Leon Faustinger, once we have accepted a lie, the second time we will accept it much more easily. As a consequence, we can see that the newspaper is publishing the same information 4 times in a row, gradually transforming it from supposition to certitude, and in this way making the target public to accept the lie. Further on, we will present some techniques of manipulation which we discovered in these articles. We don't say that it is the whole thing. I'm sure if you will analyze further, you will discover more, but I just wanted to give an example to open the appetite for such a view. It's very healthy. The technique of small steps will say, to obtain a lot, move with small steps. First, it was the opinion of some ex-members of Natha. Then it became the opinion of authorities. And in the last article is a common truth known about Natha. And of course, we obtain in this way big things. Second technique, the technique of exaggeration. If you want to obtain a big effect, use exaggerated words. Examples here: sex, lies, and yoga courses. Or a warning to the young people. Or public funding to people behind sex sect. And the examples can continue. The whole article is made in this fashion. The third technique, technique of intoxication. As a form of media manipulation, intoxication consists of saturating the channels of information with false information. In the case of the media campaign against Natha, immediately after the one-sided article from GP, the news agencies were sending the articles, which appeared almost instantaneously on almost 50 publications. Intoxication is analogically the operation of anesthetizing the public in order to make the public accept a certain major diversion or to raise the public mistrust about a certain subject, organization, or a person. We can clearly see this attempt in the media intoxication in the case of this campaign. Another technique, the technique called propaganda. This one is extremely big and widespread, and I dare to say, analyzing also other articles from this newspaper, that this Jyllands-Posten is a propaganda newspaper. They should write it there with very big letters after the Morgenavisen Jyllands-Posten, propaganda agency, because they are very good. They hit all the points in the manual of propaganda, all the points you can find in per square millimeter in their articles. Propaganda is defined as a systematic activity to transmit, promote, and to spread a certain point of view, certain ideas, from the viewpoint of a certain ideology or a social group, in order to influence or to modify or to form concepts, attitudes, opinions, and behavior in the targeted public. As a major aspect of propaganda is the fact that it simulates intelligence, but in reality, when it is in its peak, it addressed to the most irrational aspects of the being. Like, for example, it is known the case when Goebbels and Hitler were talking, Hitler was saying to Goebbels, hit the guts to the public. The British expert in propaganda, Sefton Delma, used to say, I quote, certain real news, carefully selected and skillfully presented, constitute the most subversive propaganda. He also used to say, we don't have to lie, but only deliberately and never randomly or by mistake. End of the quotation. Propaganda has to be popular, and its intellectual level has to be limited to the intelligence of the individual to which it is addressed. See the episode with Celia, which he goes to a meeting and then she finds out about the subject of the meeting from her lover. The level of intelligence of the whole article is extremely low. Any intelligent person reading this article will just say, what are you talking about? It's clearly somebody was not reporting correctly here. But that's the level of the whole article. All the arguments there, they don't have any logic because the level has to be low according to their public. Therefore, the bigger the crowd to which the propaganda has to reach, the lower its intellectual level. Looking from this perspective upon the media campaign against Natha, we can clearly recognize the features of propaganda. The arguments are very poor and mostly visceral. Celia's psychotic emotional drama, Karsten's fake intellectual statements, lacking any arguments, and Kim's truck driver language are all fit with the public target of GP. Even the way the subject is titled is only a part of propaganda: sex, lies, and yoga courses. We can say from this very title the degree of intellectuality and the possible arguments behind the article. From a certain perspective, we can say that GP agents would have got a good job in Goebbels' Nazi propaganda team. The sociological study distinguishes some propaganda methods, and I will expose some of these methods. The affective propaganda method. This method organizes messages so that they will provoke experiences and collective identifications with a character, especially at the emotional level. First, it is introduced the character in simple words so that people can identify with them. Then, the emotion built up until a negative turn where all the emotion turns into a negative feeling for the target. In the end, eventually it is suggested a positive alternative with only beneficial effects. It is surprising how close some of the articles are following this effective method of propaganda. In the article, The Long Road to Freedom, Celia is introduced in popular terms: a smart girl with high-heeled shoes and partied every weekend and had fun. Then her story built up in a very emotionally positive way in which we can participate to all her beliefs. The climax is created when she got pregnant. Of course, the climax is manipulated since she was not pregnant for the first time, but that information would have spoiled the intensity of the climax. Then, all the negative emotions which she experienced and the public experiences which are following her are turned against the target, Natha, Grig, Mihai. All our world collapsed, she says. Grig says no baby. It was a huge shock for both of us. He might as well tell us that our lives ended there. Then, after the whole negative energy of the character, Celia, is turned against the target, we can also see the positive alternative. Celia has broken all the connection with Natha, and it is restoring the connection to the world, friends, and the reality outside Natha. I want to say to the youth who are at the periphery of Natha or in other similar organizations that they have to think well. They have to think for themselves and to ask themselves what are they going into before they give up their education, before they drop friends and family, and before they end up blindly and uncritically following their leader. They risk losing the most important thing they have, freedom. We can see from this example the very clear manifestation of a method of propaganda done almost by the book. And very interesting, the original story of Celia was not like this. It was modified by these agents from GP very well to fit with the book, because her story was not really so well manipulative. Was manipulative, but not that well by the book. I mean, this story, I didn't need to do any adjustment to it. I just put the quotations on the quotations from the book, and that's it. Yes. Second method, the method of deceiving facts. In this method, the attention is focused upon transmitting very concrete facts which are saturated with relevant informations pointing into the direction wanted by the propagandist. The focus is not on the general aspects, but on small particular aspects which can be surprising for the targeted public, but which are irrelevant and misleading in the general context. In this way, it is given the strong impression of a balanced and neutral, well-documented statement, but in reality, it is a subtle misleading process. We can see again a clear method of propaganda in GP's articles. For example, when GP gives details about some students in Natha involved in some activities with erotic connotations, they give names and details, but they forget to mention where is the connection with Natha, apart from the fact that they are students in Natha. And of course, you can see any investigative journalist, this is where he will focus, not exactly what's the name of the guy who owns I don't know what site, which is exactly the connection with Natha. That was the main point to prove there. That one doesn't exist throughout the whole article and throughout all the articles, but still a lot of small details which are misleading, which is called the deceiving facts method, according to the book. Another example is when the journalist, the agent, gives the list with all the money Natha received from the city council with all the details, but without truly showing which part of the sponsorship law he presumed was broken. In any case, in such an investigation, the journalist will firstly present the law which is broken. Any investigation you will see, it starts like this. The commune is breaking paragraph 3/something something from the sponsorship law, which says this. They gave Natha this and this and this money. That will be investigation. In reality, they give all the details, but they forget to mention the link, which is the general aspect. Another example is that in Celia's statements, she's presenting a lot of details about certain emotional states, while ignoring to present their relevant connection with the whole flow of events. And the examples can continue on and on. Analyzed from this perspective, the whole material from GP is using the propaganda method of deceiving facts. Recently, another example came to our attention. In a desperate attempt to defend themselves before the press board, the GP team, I call it the GP disinformation agency in that context, because they apply this method, presented as an argument that Misa is a sect, printouts from the whole section of MISA website, which is closed, disclosing Freemasonry. The number of references and details which prove that Grieg and Misa are stating that Freemasonry is involved in strange aspects around the world is overwhelming. But then, the conclusion is forced in, stating that, therefore, Misa is a sect. Short. Since when anyone who discloses some illegal activities of an organization like Freemasonry is a sect? Is GP a sect because they disclosed some alleged illegal activities of Natha? Why didn't they print that on the front page of their newspaper? We are a sect because we attack Natha. Because if Natha is a sect saying about Freemasonry something, then GP is a sect saying about Natha something. Since when this one-sidedness? This is the method of deceiving facts. They gave in that answer several pages and attachments from this section with all kind of articles which are not even signed by Grieg. They are articles collected from the internet and posted there, talking about the implications of Freemasonry in all kind of dirty jobs. But as a conclusion of that, proving Misa is a sect. The method, the propaganda method of deceiving facts. It's surprising. I have the document here. I just got it. No, it's not this one. We have it. But anyway, this was the conclusion. Another method, the method of persuasion. The propaganda method of persuasion involves applying the rules of rhetoric in organizing the presentation using some words which are powerful from the emotional perspective or other mechanisms which are linked with the audience's ability to be persuaded. As we saw, propaganda doesn't aim to discover the truth, but instead to persuade the audience about their own ideas. The famous psychologist of the crowd, Gustave Le Bon, discovered 4 important persuasion factors which he presents as a genuine, as he called it, basic grammar of persuasion. In the following, we will present this grammar of persuasion and we will see that GP is using this grammar quite well. I don't know how much they use the Danish grammar, because I cannot read Danish, but the grammar of perception for sure they use. The first element of this grammar of persuasion, the prestige of the source. It increases the suggestion and imposes respect. The prestige can be suggested in 3 ways, says Le Bon. Institutional, an institution who is the expert. Direct participation to the events, a witness. Or the innocent victim. It gives emotional prestige and it's usually unquestionable. As we can see, GP uses all 3 this kind of prestige method. Dialogue Center is the institutional prestige, Kim Schmock has the direct participant prestige, he was Mihai's driver, and Karsten and Celia have the innocent victim prestige. Another method, statements without proof. This will eliminate discussion, creating in the same time the impression of scientific documentation of the one who is providing the information. GP articles are full of statements which don't have proof, and here are some examples. Karsten states that Natha is not what it pretends to be, without saying what Natha pretends to be. He just mentioned his opinion, without arguing with Natha's opinion. Another one. Kim states that the girls are imposed to have more sex or to bring money to the school without giving any argument about that. Dialogue Center states about Natha's concepts in a wrong way. The statements are taken from these New Age websites. Anyone can recognize these classic mistakes from there and not from Natha's website. They are not giving any argument why this is not correct. Even those statements which are copied from another website, they are not really argued upon. They just say it's not correct. Another example is the agent journalist statement that the city council is founding a sex sect without proving the connection of Natha with the activities of the students, of these incriminated activities of the students. And the examples can continue. So this was statements without proof, propaganda method. Another one, repetition. I remind you here about the quotation from Goebbels, which applies very much to GP. If you repeat a lie a few times, it remains a lie. If you repeat it 1,000,000 times, it becomes a truth. Only in the articles in GP, some notions like sex sect, public funds misused, porno movies, anti-masonry are repeated several times in one article, and they published many. And multiply this almost to 50 media channels which were taken these articles on, and you will see the method of repetition. Generally, according to the dimension and the truth transmitted, propaganda is of three types. White propaganda. This propaganda uses apparently inoffensive information, such as cultural news, lifestyle, promoting certain ideas or promoting certain personalities. White propaganda is present in the so-called soft news, which is meant to support the other two types of propaganda. You put it in between the news, the end of the news journal with some light news or soft news. Then it comes the gray propaganda. This is the most common form of propaganda used by the disinformation centers like GP. Its specificity is to combine information which is partially true with information that is totally false, structuring news which appears to be very precise, but which cannot be completely verified. In other words, they are given a lot of news with precise details, but without a follow-up on the veracity of the news. The sensation of well-documented will attract an easy acceptance from the public of the ideas which are given, cancelling in this way their need to question, using for this data, numbers and statistics which give the sensation of truth. The one who discovers something true in these numbers will draw the unconscious conclusion that the other information which comes together with the numbers must be also true. For example, all the statistics which are given in the article, like for example, how much money Natha gets from the commune every year, which is true. The guy is saying, okay, this is true. It must be the whole thing is true. Well, it's the only thing which is true there. And the black propaganda. This kind of propaganda uses false information to build messages. We also find this kind of propaganda in Jyllands-Posten articles. They are quoting sources from institutions, private people, anonymously, all which cannot be checked by the reader. This kind of news from black propaganda comes in a trend expected by the public. For example, in the economic crisis, we speak about illegal founding of a bizarre sex sect. It goes with the trend. Generally, the black propaganda uses materials from some authority or from some anonymous sources which have a certain form of prestige. A typical end of a black propaganda article is a statement like this. I quote, Mr. X didn't want to make any comments about this issue, end of the quotation, while in reality the person was not given the chance to comment. This is the definition in the book. This is exactly what ended the first article of GP. We tried to contact, they were not available. In reality, they didn't contact. The most dangerous characteristic of propaganda is that it appears to be inoffensive. Another propaganda technique, the technique of transfer. I will start with a quotation here. You will not put this crown of thorns on the forehead of the workers. You will not crucify mankind of a golden cross. End of the quotation. From the American Congressman William Jennings Bryan, which he hypocritically claimed that in 1896. Transfer is a technique through which the manipulator transfers the authority and the prestige from something that is accepted by everyone towards that which he wants us to accept. For example, if people accept the values of a democratic institution, then they will associate the statements with a democratic institution. If people appreciate and accept the church, the manipulator will put the information in the mouth of the church representative. In this way, something which we would normally reject will be accepted without question. In the mechanism of transfer, symbols are constantly used. We can see this technique in Jyllands-Posten's article. For example, public funds, they say like this, public funds, which is the authority and the new religion of the people of Denmark, and in the same box, the associative symbol, with the money from the porn industry. Another example of transfer is when presenting Natha in this way. Natha has a magnetic force to young people. Here, the usage of a scientific image, magnetic force, is transferring the idea that Natha attracts young people. The statement is correct. Another technique, the technique of witness. There is nothing wrong in quoting a qualified source, yet when the source is misused, we have a source of errors and manipulation. The most common way we find in the media is quoting on the position of an expert, people that don't have any qualification in the subject. The witness technique of manipulation is used especially when the campaign needs some weight, when the arguments are not strong enough. The witness technique was used by Jyllands-Posten by quoting unreliable sources. Sources which were stained by personal interests, Kim, Karsten, Celia, or experts which doesn't exist, monologue center. The technique called simple people. Using so-called simple people, the people from the street, the manipulator convinced the audience that the ideas he propagates are from the people. This method combines also the method of transfer, because it transfers the authority of simple people, the crowd, to the idea the manipulator put forward. For example, most of the American presidents are millionaires, but they try to present themselves as normal people, eating in common places, chatting with people from the street, swimming in the most crowded beach, or going on the most crowded beach. Jyllands-Posten presented Karsten and Celia as simple people. Their approach is only human, and no word about their special interest and their special position in Natha, which give them the personal interest. The whole image of Karsten and Celia is the image of simple people. In this way, the story starts to be a story of people versus Natha instead of two ex-members with special position versus Natha. By this, Jyllands-Posten insinuate that they represent the people and not some particular interest, which is the case in reality. Another technique, the technique of recalling fear. The social psychologists and specialists in communication made studies to determine the efficiency of this method. The conclusions are that it is an extraordinarily efficient technique in which the manipulator warns the targeted audience about the disaster to come in absence of certain measures. This technique speculates the deep fears of the public, the manipulator aiming to direct the attention from the reality directly to his proposals. Specialists in manipulation discovered that the recalling fear manipulation technique will not modify the behavior of the public if the public is not given the hope that they can change the potentially dangerous situation. Let's analyze now the Jyllands-Posten articles. In the first article, there are expressions such as dialogue center strongly warns. Jesper and Kim Schmock tell these things about Natha to warn others about getting involved. Natha is not so innocent they pretend, and so on. In the second article, we have the long way to freedom, which already gives the public a hope. This article talks about a woman who could break free. She also warned the youth, but now the technique is fulfilled, and people know they can change the situation, thus the fear is accepted. The whole construction of these two first articles, supported by the coming ones, is a masterpiece of the manipulative technique, which is called recalling fear. I would say it's one of their best parts in the articles. Sociologists discovered 4 conditions for this extremely powerful technique to work. First one, a warning, or marking or indicating a threat. Here in the campaign we have Natha, the sex sect, a threat to people's freedom, with several warnings acknowledging that. The second condition for this technique to work, a certain recommendation for the behavior of the public. Here we have the repeated suggestion that after they have broken free from the organization, the threat is removed. It's several times the articles say that. Another point which specialists discover, and the articles presented perfectly, the understanding from the public that the recommendation will be efficient in approaching the threat. Here we have the ordinary people, Carsten and Celia, representing the member of the public who regained their freedom, and therefore the threat was removed. And the 4th point, the understanding from the public that they are capable to behave in the recommended way. Here again we have the example of ordinary people who managed to get out the sect, and now they serve as an example. As you can see, the technique of recalling fear is extremely well controlled by these agents in the newspaper, and I also saw it in other articles they have. They're quite good in their bad way. The technique of abused logic. An abused logic is creating a false link between the hypothesis and the conclusion. Usually, abused logic is used in manipulation campaigns when the public has to have a low level of intelligence. Well, too bad for Julian's Posten public, because they use it a lot. Even though it might sound impossible, abused logic is a widespread and successful manipulation technique. To give you as an example from politics, it was from a campaign. Bill Clinton support control weapon legislation. This is a statement. Second statement, all fascist regimes from the 20th century were supporting control weapon legislation. Conclusion, Bill Clinton is a fascist. In the Julian's Posten campaign, having an audience which is suitable for this method, the abused logic method was used abusively. Examples, just a few examples. A teacher of Natha participated to an erotic movie. Therefore, Natha is a sex sect. Natha's teachers are coordinated by a student from Misa. Therefore, Misa controls Natha. Few people disagree with Natha's point of view. Therefore, Natha is a dangerous organization. See the several warnings. Misa published quotation from renowned authors who state that Freemasonry is involved in worldwide manipulation. Therefore, Misa is a sect. Some students have a company which produces erotic movies. Therefore, Natha misuses funds from the city council. Some of the Natha teachers are involved in erotic movies. Therefore, public funds are mixed with money from sexual services in Natha money common box. And the examples can continue ad infinitum with these articles. In fact, we dare to say that the GP agent managed to break the record of avoiding true logic per number of words. Another technique of fake extrapolation. The tendency to create generalization based on small facts is a common error in logic. Extrapolation should be used with prudence. A common illustration of extrapolation, which is given in classic texts, is the one of a driver who found 3 gas stations in less than 2 kilometers on the highway. Therefore, he drew the conclusion that there must be a lot of gas stations all the way to the North Pole. This manipulation technique is often associated with the recalling of fear technique, thereby increasing their power. For example, one person with declared fanatic behavior felt pressed by Natha's environment, and then that person declared that the whole movement is a movement of fanatics, which is an extrapolation of this fake extrapolation. And the examples also will continue. I will not Here were only some of the manipulation methods that we discovered analyzing the material published by Jyllands-Posten. For the sake of clarity, we restrained only to the most visible aspects, and we didn't enter the indirect methods that were more spectacular, but they need more time and argumentation to prove. All these pieces of information are based on studies and researches on social psychology and these techniques of manipulation that cover more than 100 years. As anyone can see, the Jyllands-Posten campaign is fitting with all the presented elements of manipulation. The question which arises here is, did they make this with a conscious intention? Of course, this is also the problem when we disclose such a situation. It is so far out that it cannot be true. Yet, it was methodically analyzed, and there is no doubt about the quotations. Therefore, the only aspect that is left is to find out if it was on purpose and why doing this. We will investigate briefly the Orla Borg connection, the journalist connection, the journalist that wrote the articles. The only explanation that is left before enlarging the picture. Was he just an incompetent? Is he having some problems with Natha Yoga School or with this type of organization generally? Is he hunting some opportunities to get wind in the sails, so to speak, to get some name as a journalist? Reading these articles, we can think of all these together, but after realizing how many manipulation techniques are used in his articles, having a perspective upon his previous acts, one cannot ignore another hypothesis. He is serving a much bigger system, and from time to time, he is used as a hand to create something that he is well trained with, propagandistic manipulation. With other words, we come to the conclusion that Orla Borg is just a pawn, a low rank in the lodge, if in the case he is already in the Masonic lodge. And here are some elements that will, let's say, underline this. I'll go briefly through a very good material which was made by one of our colleagues. The material will be published on the website, so you can see there a research on this journalist work. First of all, he's not a dilettante, or at least he's not a beginner. He was working there for 13 years and wrote more than 3,000 articles. As a person writing 3,000 articles, of course, you can say he knows what he's doing, even though he doesn't do it right, but he knows what he's doing. He has certain success, even he gained some EU competition, silver medal in the EU competition, Use the Differences, Stop Discrimination. Interesting competition he won, knowing who's sponsoring this competition. Also, he was the one who was gaining the Laus Jensen Journalist Prize for his investigation in the Twind case. It is very interesting to conclude from this analysis, a long analysis, very well made, about his activity, that according to his previous journalistic work, the investigation in Natha Yoga Center is exceptional, meaning not that it is exceptionally good, but he proved himself to become a witch hunter, or a modern witch hunter, a person either without any journalistic preparation or serving a completely different purpose than that of being a journalist. I'm saying this because in other articles he wrote, he proved to be balanced, he proved to be extremely accurate in reporting both sides, even careful not to present one side disproportionate with the arguments of the other side. If you ask yourself if he is sexually obsessed, because he seems to have a problem with Natha's erotic part, he is not necessarily obsessed, because in 3,000 articles he used the word sex only in 37 articles, and more than half of them in Natha's articles. Therefore, it seems he has a problem with sexuality in Natha, not elsewhere. Another aspect which is very interesting to notice about this individual is the fact that he is making a very good report on different social events. He is not an ignorant regarding social events and social organizations. He proved to be balanced in some cases and to report in a very good way. He has 3 exceptions about that. In these 3 exceptions, he behaved in the same way. Yet, we dare to say that with Natha, kind of he gave his final exam absolving the manipulation university. Because in the first 2, you can see he's a little dilettante. He makes some mistakes. He's not just by the book. One example, it's a Muslim organization. The other one I said is called Twind, and the other one is called Natha. It is very interesting to notice that he has some patterns to attack certain aspects of organizations. When you will see, when we will enlarge the picture immediately after this, when we finish with him, we will see something very interesting. Exactly the way he apparently mistake his journalistic career, only in 3 cases, as we could find out, is exactly the behavior which is requested to this kind of agents by a larger picture, as we will see. What I want to say is that this individual, Orla Borg, he was attacking with exactly the same unjustified, irrelevant, but highly efficient methods of manipulation, this Muslim organization, which was an organization without any radical views, without any aggressiveness, without any threat to the social level. The only thing which they clearly have, it was a very strict religious follow. They were trying to follow their religion very strict. The second one was a school, a very big school, which was having a very big success in organizing people which were having these psychological imbalances. And this school was regarded as a very big help to the other organizations around, and so on. And Natha, which you already know. In these cases, the 3 organizations don't look like each other at all. They cannot be compared from any point of view, except that you can say they have an alternative view upon life. And this is the only thing which is different, that indeed in Natha, people are given an entire, complete system to understand life and to live their life, not necessarily alternative that you go out, because as you could see, the indication always comes to get to integrate, but simply an alternative way to understand your own life. The other one, the school, was also giving an alternative social life. And the Muslim was having an alternative, well, they have their religion, which they try to follow intensely. As you will see further, there is a strong general interest to remove such organizations. In a strange way, this Orla Borg make himself, unconsciously or not, the agent, the efficient agent to attack such organizations. In the rest of the time, he's doing fine.